Hello, and welcome to Dark Hearts with Stacey Lee. Before we begin, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to support me. It has been slower than cold tar here. I don't know if it's the rebrand, I don't know if it's January, but I had like my worst month last month. And so I'm trying not to be discouraged because the feedback from you all has been amazing. You are literally keeping me afloat right now. But please spread the word about the channel, share it any way you can because oh my gosh. You can also join my Patreon. We have a big fundraising goal there that is starting this week. I'm so excited about it, and you can be a part of it. Today I have for you a story that since the moment I heard about it has really kind of haunted me. It's a more recent story and one that I think about every time my kids go out hiking or for a run. And I think about it when I look into the future and I see my little granddaughters growing up and wanting their freedom, wanting to go out by themselves and explore. And I wonder how on earth, with stories like this one, as fresh in my mind as they always are, how am I ever gonna be able to let that happen? There are consequences to doing what I do, and thinking the worst case scenario at every turn is one of those consequences. I study bad people, and I think this story haunts me because it reminds me of something I would do or something my kids would do. You could easily take this story and turn it into a horror film because it has all of the elements built in. A creepy old loser, his filthy house, homemade pornography, a stash of women's clothing and underwear when there is no woman around to wear those items, and of course, a makeshift dungeon in an old barn in the middle of nowhere. Like I said, it's a horror film. This is the absolutely heartbreaking story about a young woman whose life ended simply because she was in exactly the wrong place at exactly the wrong time. And this is a story about a man that I find to be one of the most vile, full of himself for no reason, unlikable men I have ever come across. This is the story of James D. Worley and the murder of Sierra Joughin and the Barn of Horrors. I'm your host, Stacey Lee. Let's begin. Our story begins in Delta, Ohio, a very rural, all-American small town that looks like something out of a Coen Brothers film. The cornfields stretch for miles and the people all know each other, but mostly keep to themselves. It's beautiful and peaceful on the surface, but as is almost always the case, not nearly as safe as it appears at first glance. Sierra Joughin was on summer break from the University of Toledo, and she'd come home to spend time with her family and with her boyfriend. At around 6:45 on the night of the 19th, 20-year-old Sierra was riding her bicycle home from her boyfriend's house. Sierra was on her bike, and her boyfriend, Josh Kolazinski, rode alongside her on his motorcycle. As they rode, Josh snapped a Snapchat video of the two enjoying the summer night together, never having any idea that this would be the last image ever taken of Sierra and the last night of her life. Josh was riding with Sierra partway back to her house. The two then stopped at the usual fork in the road where they split, and they said goodnight. Josh said he gave Sierra a kiss and told her that he loved her and to text him when she got home. This is just so familiar to me. My best girlfriend growing up, her name was Kathy. We only lived 2 houses apart, but at night it was kind of scary, and we would say, "Meet me half." And we would meet in front of the neighbor that's house sat between us. That was our thing, meet me half. Then when it was time for one of us to go back to our house from whosever house we'd been at, we'd say, "Walk me half." Just good memories, you know, and something very close to home for me. So Sierra and Josh parted ways here on County Road 6 near Metamora, Ohio. An hour passed, and then 2. Sierra's remaining ride home would have only taken a few minutes on her bike, and her family was concerned. Josh was texting and then calling Sierra's phone, but he never got any reply. When it got dark, everyone was worried enough that they called the police. Josh immediately joined the search efforts and told the police and the family where the two had last been, where he'd last seen Sierra. The police and searchers went to County Road 6 and began to look for Sierra. Immediately, they knew something was very, very wrong. There in the Ohio cornfields on a beautiful summer night, they saw signs of a struggle. There were broken corn stalks, snapped in half as something or someone had come through the cornfield quickly and without any caution. The corn stalks were laying on the ground and the leaves had been trampled. There were scuff marks in the dirt, and as investigators stood and looked at the scene, they became very, very quiet. This looked like something out of a scary movie, a monster waiting in the corn stalks at the end of the day as the sun was beginning to set, watching and waiting for a chance to strike. One of the officers said his ears kind of started to ring and the hair on the back of his neck stood up, and he just got an eerie feeling looking at the broken corn and the scuff marks in the dirt. And then as they continued to look around the area, one of the officers' flashlights hit something that caused a bright reflection. Peering through the corn stalks, about 30 feet down one of the long rows, was Sierra's bicycle. It looked as though someone had attempted to hide it. Their hearts sank and they knew this was very, very bad. As badly as the police wanted to rush to the bike and examine it, they knew they had to be careful. This was most likely a crime scene and they had to preserve it and all of the evidence surrounding it. A CSI team was brought in and the area was cordoned off. Then they found a pair of sunglasses. The sunglasses Sierra was wearing on the bike ride. These sunglasses right here. Then they found a second pair of sunglasses that did not belong to Sierra. They then found a bright green sock, the footy type of sock that you wear with tennis shoes and shorts, just like the socks Sierra had been wearing in the photo Josh snapped of her hours earlier. They found a fuse, commonly used in motorcycles, and then they found this, a bright orange-handled screwdriver lying in the dirt among the bent corn stalks. Police made their way to the bicycle. There was obvious blood on the handlebars. There were specks of blood on the bars of the bicycle as well. Then they found a motorcycle helmet that was covered with scuff marks, scratches, and what appeared to be more blood. Now, they knew that Sierra had not been wearing a helmet as she rode her bike, especially not a motorcycle helmet. Then the police found these tire tracks in the dirt that did not belong to Josh's motorcycle. And then the helmet made sense. Somebody else had been in the cornfield on a motorcycle wearing that helmet. All of the items they found were carefully photographed and then collected. The search parameters were widened, but Sierra Joughin was not in the cornfield. What on earth had happened to her? Police began to knock on doors in the surrounding area. This all happened less than a mile from Sierra's house. This was an area she was very familiar with. She knew the area well. She knew the people well, and they knew her. As the police began to speak with neighbors, one man had a very strange reaction to their questioning. His name is James Worley, and while other neighbors showed concern and were upset about hearing there was a possible abduction in the area, James Worley was just angry. He was annoyed at being questioned, and right off the bat, he was just incredibly rude to the police who were doing nothing more than trying to find a missing young woman. James Worley lived on 3 acres of property west of Toledo. He ran a small engine repair shop out of the house he lived in with his brother and his mother. As the police talked to James, he was an ass. He could not have been more rude or more off-putting, and then he said something very strange. James told the police that he knew right where the abduction had taken place because he had been there earlier in the day. James said he'd been riding his motorcycle on County Road 6 when it broke down. He claimed he pulled over as the bike stopped running, and oh, by the way, he had also lost his sunglasses, his helmet, some motorcycle fuses, and an orange-handled screwdriver when he did. That is very convenient. These guys think the rest of us are idiots. They really do. He knows at this point that the cops have found those exact items near the location of Sierra's bike. I mean, come on, James. Just how stupid do you think we are? Pretty stupid, apparently. As the police continue to talk to James, as we see so often in these cases, James becomes his own worst enemy. In fact, I want you to hear his reply when the police tell him that they found his helmet and it's covered in blood.
Let's talk to them about the helmet. What about the helmet? You found the helmet? Yes. Okay, where's the helmet at? Who had it? Who had it? Along the road. You found it along the road? Well, I didn't find it, but someone did. Well, bring it on here, because I want my helmet back.
Well, that's why we're here mostly, is because the helmet looks like it might have some blood on it.
No.
James is like so many killers that we see. He thinks he's smarter than everyone else, when in fact, he is a walking Dunning-Kruger graph, and he thinks he can talk his way out of anything. James actually says to the police, "I didn't steal anything, I didn't steal anyone, I didn't kill anyone." That's a very weird thing to say in the very first hours of an investigation when no body has even been found. And then one of the cops notices James Worley has fresh wounds on his legs. He's got like these big blue and purple bruises. You know how right after you strike, one of your arms or your legs on something and it gets that dark purple blue color? Really fresh. The police then ask James Worley, "Can we look around your property?" And he says, basically, "For what? I didn't do anything." And the police tell him, "Then let us look around. And once we see your place, if you haven't done anything, we will cross you off the list." So James finally acquiesces and lets the cops into his house. The first thing they see is his bedroom, which looks exactly like you'd imagine it would. This guy is getting no play at all. It's dirty and gross, as is the whole house. They walk around in the kitchen and the family room, and then they tell James they want to go outside. At first, James hesitates, but then he lets the cops look around a little bit. So the police walk around the perimeter of the property, and then they come to this old barn. Now, what James Worley did not know at the time is that a witness had come forward in the hours after Sierra first went missing, and that witness told the police that they'd seen a license plate number on a motorcycle in the area. The police had looked that license plate up. And who was it registered to? You will never believe this, James Worley. So even before the cops went to James' house, they had already looked into this guy. And when they did, they found out that in 1990, he was convicted of assaulting and attempting to kidnap a woman who he knocked off her bicycle. We can't even ride our bikes, ladies. And you know what? It sucks. Can we just commiserate here for a minute? And men, can you just listen for 1 second? I have this friend from Austin, and he has totally changed his lifestyle. He quit drinking, he's lost 60 pounds, and he did it all by getting up very early in the morning before the sun comes up, and he runs 10 miles a day. 10 miles a day. And as I've watched his journey and felt happy for him, I am not going to lie, there is always this little part of me that's angry. Like, good for you. Good for you that you can get up before the sun comes up and run in the dark, shirtless and carefree with your headphones in. He's a drummer and he loves music and he just puts his headphones on and runs. And I'm like jealous. I'm jealous of him for all the women that cannot do that. And then I feel bad for being angry and jealous. And then I'm like, no, I have every right to be angry and jealous because I'm a night person. I am most active and alert between like 5 in the afternoon and midnight. And I would love to go out walking alone at that time. I would absolutely love to do that. And I can't. I simply can't. And it sucks. And I think I have every right, as every woman in this country has every right, to be angry about that. If you're a female, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm not saying all men are safe either. We know that. You guys know me better than that. But it is this small percentage of men that ruin it for everybody. The good men, and there are plenty of those, hate these guys as much as we do. I just cannot imagine how wonderful it would be to just put my headphones on at night and just run in the hot summer air. I just think that sounds like heaven, and I can't do it. This is why we talk about these kinds of crimes. This is why we talk about these kinds of men. This is why it's important to discuss these things. We have to talk about the situation that we're in order to perhaps make some change. So I always get a little annoyed with my super feminist friends. I consider myself a feminist. I think everyone should be a feminist. But then you've got the kind of the Yahtzees or whatever. I know some people get mad when you say that word. But they take it too far and they man hate. We need men. We need men on our side. We need men on our team. We have to work together to make this situation better. And no one likes to be swept into a general category. How do you think it feels to be a man and have everyone saying, all men are dangerous, all men are awful? That's bullshit. Most men are good. Most men are decent, but it's this small percentage that just ruins it. Anyways, now I'm all fired up. I'm sure you're shocked. You're shocked that I'm fired up about something. But this poor girl was just riding her bike. She had a male escort with her more than half of the way, and now she's gone. So the cops are already looking at James Worley with a very strong side eye after learning about his history, and his incredibly odd behavior does nothing to help him out. He's just loud and angry and rude, acting like a total ass to the cops. So they decide it's time to make it more official, and they do a more official search. Now, I don't know if they got a warrant before this initial search or if they still had James' permission at this point, but they enter the barn. You guys. At first, it looks like a typical barn. It's actually much cleaner than the house is, and the police notice that there is a rake and a shovel right here leaning up against the wall, and they can see that those tools have been very recently used to tidy up the barn. They can see that the earth has been moved around a little bit, and the hay has too. And then as they continue to look around, it gets much more sinister. As you can see here, there's a stack of hay bales kind of stacked around this green crate thing that kind of looks like a cage. And there's one bale of hay that's thrown in front of the green crate in kind of a half-assed attempt to hide the front of it. The cops move all of this aside. I told you guys, this is a horror film. And they find a secret room. In this hidden room, this little area, they find a freezer, this freezer right here, and it is lined with filthy carpet that has a very foul odor and what appears to be blood on it. They can also see that the room has been fitted with restraints. There are markings and bolts installed so that someone can be easily tied up in the room. Then they come across this little treasure trove. Packaged neatly into clear Ziploc baggies and labeled with a black marker are bags and bags of women's clothing and lingerie. One packet is labeled beach dress, one is labeled bikini bottoms, one is labeled Daisy Dukes. This guy is so freaking creepy and disgusting. It's fine if you want to buy clothes for your woman or you like a certain kind of clothing or whatever, but there should be a woman involved. If the guy isn't wearing them himself, and there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do, you shouldn't just be buying women's clothing to just have them around. One little packet says lace, and one packet says black mini, and then there's lots and lots of women's panties. This pair here has been worn, and there is blood on them. Investigators continue searching the barn. They find lots and lots of rope. They find duct tape. They find zip ties, and they find a canister of pepper spray, a pink one, like a woman would carry. The cops find bondage attire, and they even find a little lace tube-style bralette, just like the one Sierra was known to wear. There's a ski mask, too, because of course there is. The cops are pretty shocked and horrified at what they found, but oh no, wait, remember, James Worley is the smartest guy in any room, and he's got a full-blown explanation for all of this, for the secret room, for the restraints, the women's clothing. You see, my friends, James is going to start a pornography studio. James is getting into porn, and all of these things are just things that he has recently purchased to have for the scenes that he's going to be shooting. Can you imagine this doofus getting any woman to come out to his creepy ass barn to film pornography? Where's the camera equipment? Where's the lighting? And hello, a barn? He really does truly believe that everyone else but him is an idiot. He has to believe that if he thinks there's any chance anyone is buying this. The police also discover that James' entire property is covered by hidden cameras. There are hidden cameras pointed at every little nook and cranny of the property, and James is watching everything that goes on around it at all times. Because of course he is. Cops pulled James Worley's cell phone records and discover that he was, in fact, on County Road 6 at the time of Sierra's disappearance. Was he driving by at some point like he said? No. His cell phone records show that he was in one location on County Road 6 for 2 hours. 2 hours. The police also learn that James has a court-mandated therapist. And so the police have a visit with that therapist, and the therapist tells them that James has admitted, quote, learning something from each and every abduction he has done, and the next one he's going to bury. That's the exact quote. I know it's confusing. So basically, James tells the therapist, every woman that I've abducted, I've learned something from that experience, but the next one I abduct, I'm going to bury her. What? Like, I get it. Therapy is private, and there's a fine line therapists have to walk between, client-therapist privilege and telling the cops, but I also know there are laws in place that do allow therapists to alert officials when they think someone is dangerous. If this guy has told the therapist he's learned something from each abduction and the next one he's going to bury, doesn't that seem to you like something the therapist should tell the police? I mean, I looked and I couldn't find more information on that, but that was so upsetting to me. But anyway, the police gather all of this evidence and they find all of this incredibly disturbing information regarding James. And then they know, finally, it's time. James Worley is arrested on July 22nd, 3 days after Sierra goes missing. He is charged with abduction and taken in for questioning. An exhaustive search was conducted at James' property, but Sierra was not found. Later that evening, around 6 p.m., as James is still sitting in an interview with police, searchers came across a spot in the dirt near the cornfield. This one here, near County Road 7, that had been freshly dug. There, they uncovered a shallow grave and found the body of Sierra Joughin. She had been hogtied with her wrists handcuffed and her feet bound to her wrists with rope. She had a large plastic toy of some kind in her mouth. I've read accounts that said it was a dog toy, but it was being used as a gag. It had been shoved into her mouth with such force that it broke her teeth and suffocated her. Sierra was also wearing an adult diaper, leading authorities to believe she had been kept somewhere nearby. There was no evidence of sexual assault, which, I don't know, for some reason, that didn't surprise me. This guy screams impotence to me, but he had definitely done something to Sierra. She had been through something very long and horrific. Suffocating with a plastic toy in your mouth, I mean, that was terrible enough, but I think he kept her after he took her for a while. An autopsy was performed, but they couldn't really find much to mark the time of death. So the time of death was 9 p.m. on July 22nd. That was the time when she was found. They couldn't really tell how long she had been kept after the abduction. The media finds out about James Worley's past, and reporters start digging around to find out exactly what this guy did. And when it gets out that he did these other things to young women and then got out, it was not good. People were very angry, and they have a right to be. In 1990, James Worley attacked 26-year-old Robin Gardner, who was riding her bike. He first tried to run her off the road with his car. He knocked her over and then tried to handcuff her to the inside of his car. But once Robin was down on the ground, James came at her, holding the handcuffs, and he grabbed her and dragged her towards his car. He was trying to handcuff one end of the cuffs to something inside the car when Robin began to struggle, and she broke free. She got away from James and went to the police, and he was arrested and convicted. Guess how much time he did for this? 3 years. This maniac, who is running women off the road on their bikes and then trying to drag them into his car and handcuff them, got 3 years for that offense. People began hearing about this, and they were, like I said, rightfully angry. How was this monster living in their midst the entire time, right there, without any of them knowing anything about it? The trial begins, and the prosecution puts its case together using James' cell phone and computer history, things like that, and the picture becomes quite clear using those digital tracking tools. James Worley had been sitting in his mother's house in the basement, like the loser he is, watching porn for hours before he attacked Sierra. His web browsing history is the stuff of nightmares. I'm not even going to go into it. It's just this gross, perverted old man who's got the personality of a bag of hair, sitting there watching really disturbing porn, knowing he's got no outlet for this. No woman wants him. So what's he going to do? He's going to force someone to be with him. He gets on his motorcycle and he ambushed Sierra after just happening by her on County Road 6. It's terrifying. Had she not been right there in that exact spot at that exact time, she would most likely still be alive, and that's horrifying. Prosecutors believe James ran Sierra off the road using his motorcycle, and then he took his helmet off and beat her with it. Sierra's DNA was all over that helmet. It would later come out that her DNA was also on a roll of duct tape that the police found back at the barn. After James attacked Sierra, he sat in the cornfield with her, most likely with her unconscious, until it was dark, which is a picture in my head that next time I'm driving through a cornfield, I will not be stopping anywhere. He sat there and he waited for it to get dark, and then he called his brother to tell his brother that his motorcycle had broken down. That was his excuse as to why he was gone for so long. After it got dark, with Sierra most likely tied up and unable to move, James rode his bike back to the house, got his van, and then drove the van back to County Road 6 to the crime scene. A witness later came forward and said they had seen James in his van after it got dark that night, speeding down the road. He loaded Sierra into his van and drove her back to his property, taking her out of the van and putting her in the barn. When he had her all alone in private, he physically assaulted her, hog-tied Sierra, undressed her, placed the adult diaper on her, which must have been horrifying for her. And it would be my guess, I could be wrong on this, maybe tried to assault her but could not perform. That's just the vibe I personally get from that guy. He's so angry. And studying so many of these guys over the years, I just get the vibe that his anger was caused by the fact that he was impotent. Again, this is total conjecture on my part. But being so angry that he shoved that plastic toy in her mouth so hard that it broke her back molars, that is rage. He then took Sierra back to the cornfield and buried her about 2 feet deep. It was a horrible death. And like I said a couple weeks ago about Glenn Gowker, the guy who killed Ethan Walton over a land deal, with these type of guys that do these things, like you or I would go to a drive-through and order lunch, and we know it's them, maybe we have a different set of rules for them. Because I'm not ashamed to say I don't believe this guy should continue taking up oxygen. Sometimes I wonder if death isn't too good for them. It's quick. Maybe we, come up with something else. I don't know. He's just a disgusting piece of trash. James went on trial, and on March 28, 2018, he was found guilty of 17 of the 19 counts, included aggravated murder. It took the jury less than 6 hours to find him guilty on all those counts. James' attorneys tried to say he was a damaged man, that he was motivated by sexual sadism, and he had a fetish disorder, mental health issues, sexual paraphilia disorder. You know what? I don't care. I just don't. There are people that have all of those problems, all of those disorders, all of those fetishes, and still know it's wrong to hurt another human being. And if you do hurt another human being, I don't really care what your disorders are. I want to study them. I want to learn about them. I want to educate myself. But I don't think unless you are clinically insane in the moment that you commit the crime that I care much about why you did it. I'm very, very tired of watching people hurt other people and trying to blame problems that all of us live with. I have depression. I have OCD. My best friend grew up in a manner that he should be a serial killer, and he's a wonderful person. We all have trauma and we all have issues, and you do not get to blame your problems for doing something horrible that hurts another person. Yes, it's part of the puzzle. I recognize that. I do. It's why I'm so fascinated with the psychology of these killers. I recognize it's part of the problem, but I don't like seeing it used as the blame for what happened. Maybe I'm having my cake and eating it too. I don't know. The prosecution pointed out that James Worley had a pretty average upbringing, that he knew the difference between right and wrong, and everyone agreed. Right before sentencing, as our courts allow, James was allotted time to give a statement. And I'm going to play you a snippet of that sentence. I'd like to play you more, but this Ohio courtroom apparently uses a potato for a recording device, and the audio is horrendous. I hate listening to bad audio, so I won't put you through much of it, but it was satisfying to see Sierra's family get up and walk out of the courtroom while he was talking.
He asked the judge to speak before being sentenced, that speech lasting 45 minutes. Worley faced the family proclaiming his innocence and seemed to have an excuse for all of the evidence stacked against him. But after listening for some time, Worley said he had love in his heart for the Joughin family and tried to explain that he felt terrible for them. Sierra's grandfather got up and walked out, and the rest of the family followed, many sobbing, others showing faces full of anger and rage. Here's a portion of what James Worley's statement was.
Their hearts are wounded, and they always will be. But if you believe like I believe that Sierra goes on. She may have been murdered and victimized, but she goes on.
In the end, James D. Worley didn't outsmart anyone. He is not the smartest guy in any room. He is not charming. He is not witty. He's not handsome or interesting. He's just a waste of space who had a miserable life and ruined the lives of people unfortunate enough to cross his path. The judge agreed and sentenced him to die. Even in prison, he remains unrepentant, angry, and arrogant.
Here's my thing. You will be killed. Okay, you're going to be killed.
I will be killed.
Yeah, you have a death sentence in 2025, okay? So let me just say
I
this.
doubt if that happens.
Okay, but maybe you can stop that. You're running out of appeals. If you give
that process will outlast my life.
Maybe if you give the name of someone who helped you.
There was no one that helped me because I'm not involved in it.
James Worley can believe whatever he wants. His incorrect beliefs do not change the truth, and the truth of the matter is, he is going to be killed. His execution is currently scheduled for May 20th, 2025. He has filed all of the appeals and even got a stay at one point, but he's very quickly running out of options. As it stands now, all of his appeals have been rejected, and on July 1st, 2021, the Ohio Supreme Court affirmed his convictions and his execution date. Out of this tragedy, Sierra's family has chosen to do some good, which I always find to be such an admirable thing. They have worked with legislators to pass Sierra's law, which creates a database for violent offenders. It is primarily for law enforcement officers, but citizens can use the database to learn if there are felons living in their area. Sierra's parents have also created a group called Sierra Strong, which makes self-defense classes available to all girls and boys in the community. I want to send Sierra's family and friends love from our community. What you have been through is everyone's worst nightmare, and we all hope you are healing the best way you can. As for James Worley, the time will come when you take that final walk down the hall on death row, and that time cannot come soon enough. You took what no one has the right to take, and you did the unthinkable, all to satisfy your sick and perverted desires. The world is a better place with you locked in a cage for the rest of your miserable days on this earth. Thank you so much for joining me today, my friends. Hit the like button, subscribe if you would, and you can even join my Patreon to help us raise money for cold case DNA testing. We want to raise money and donate it to police departments so they can get cold case sexual assault kits tested. Fundraising has begun. Look for those videos. I want you to know how much I appreciate you. Your support is why I'm still here, and together I really feel like we can make some positive change. Stay safe, my friends, and be kind to each other, and I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacey Lee. Bye.